Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to this session. The last session we had was before August, and I'm going to continue about cleanliness in Islam. I'll continue from where we actually left off. So going back, we start with the information that there's two types of impurities. Najasat haqiqiyya and najasat hukmiyya. So I explain that najasat haqiqiyya means that type of impurity which can be seen, that type of filth which can be seen. For example, blood, excretion, etc. And I also explained that there are two types of najasat hukmiyya, haqiqiyya, sorry, which is najasat ghaliza and najasat khafifa. Then najasat ghaliza, which is a heavy type of impurity, for example, blood, alcohol, that then has two types, najasat mar'iyya and ghair mar'iyya. So if it's the heavy type of impurity, for example, najasat mar'iyya, then to remove that impurity, the method is to wash it in such a way that the impurity is no longer visible, and if a person is to smell the impurity, the smell has also been removed. So if the impurity can be seen, it has to be removed in such a manner where the impurity is no longer visible. The second type of impurity is najasat ghair mar'iyya. For example, urine. So a type of impurity which cannot be seen. Any type of impurity which cannot be seen, for example, urine, maybe alcohol, if it dries up and you can't see it, then in them circumstances, it needs to be washed. The cloth needs to be washed 3 times, and in such a manner that after each rinse, it needs to be squeezed. But I did mention also that if it's been washed under a tap, because the water from a tap is running water, squeezing would no longer be necessary or required. So the minimum a person would wash is 3 times, and if the person is doubtful, a person has doubts, or a person has a sickness of being doubtful, then the maximum is 7 times, and then the Sharia would ordain that the cloth is now pak and clean. So that was najasat hukmiyya, and I did go into more detail last time. The second major type of impurity is known as najasat hukmiyya. Now this falls under 2 categories. The first one is known as hadath akbar, and the second one known is hadath asghar. Hadath akbar means a major impurity which requires a person to have a bath. So without taking a ritual bath, an Islamic bath, a person would not be regarded as pure. For example, a person has a wet dream. A woman has finished her menstrual cycle, or after a woman has had a child and the bleeding stops, then she needs to have a bath. And also when the husband and wife meet, then also a bath is required. The second type of impurity is hadath asghar, which is a minor impurity, which requires only wuzu. So for example, passing wind, going to the toilet, flowing blood, falling asleep, becoming unconscious, all these factors would 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 invalidate the wuzu. And if a person wishes to read the Quran Kareem, touch the Quran Kareem, or also pray salah, then he or she would be required to perform the ritual ablution. So I've already mentioned this, that prior to any farz salah, obligatory salah or wajib salah, sunnah or nafil, any salah you want to perform, and the wuzu has been invalidated, then wuzu needs to be, an ablution needs to be performed. By performing ablution, a person would rid themselves of the hadath asghar, the minor impurity. When a person performs salah, they also need to be free from najasat hakiki, sorry. Now I already mentioned najasat hakiki means those types of impurities which can be seen, heavy types of impurity. So let's say, for example, somebody had alcohol on their clothes, they had blood on their clothes, or they had urine on their clothes, some kind of impurity, and it was more than the amount that is excusable. Then in them circumstances, praying salah in them circumstances would not be allowed with those clothes on. Or even if the impurity had touched a person's body or was on a person's body and it was more than the excusable amount, then salah would not be allowed. It would not be valid unless that impurity has been removed from a person's body or clothing. And I've already explained that if it does touch the clothing, how are you supposed to get rid of that? And just to recap also, if it touches the body, and I've already explained this, we will have a look whether the impurity is either less than a 50p coin amount or equal or more than. If it's less than a 50p coin amount, then in them circumstances, it's better to be washed. If a person did read their salah, then it would be allowed. If a person made tawaf to the Kaaba in them circumstances, again, it would be allowed. But if it's equal to a 50p coin or more, then it would be wajib to wash that part of the body before a person commences salah or tawaf of the Kaaba or any other act of worship which requires a person to be a person's body to be pure. Okay, the next part we're going to move on to is called istinja. What is istinja? Istinja is purification after the call of nature. So washing yourself in the Islamic manner once you've been to the toilet. Islam is a very clear religion. Now, when we look at other religions of the world, we look at Christianity, Buddhism, Judaism, Sikhism, Hinduism, any other religion, you will not find, and I can guarantee you will not find in their religious text a method of washing yourself after urination or after going to the toilet. That in itself is proof that Islam is a very comprehensive religion. It covers everything, and that in itself is proof that Islam is the true religion, which covers every single aspect of life. And only a religion that has been approved by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can give you such a detail about each and every aspect of life. So Islam does not only just focus on religious spirituality, it also focuses on hygiene. And all these aspects that we've spoken about, we've mentioned, is all to do with hygiene. Nowadays, we have the coronavirus pandemic. Now, the experts say you need to wash your hands for 20 seconds. I mean, we as Muslims do that anyway. Before every salah, before we pray the Quran Kareem, we touch the Quran Kareem, or any other rituals that we're doing, we wash our limbs thoroughly. And again, that's something that was taught to us 1400 years ago, how to stay hygienic Islamically. It was once said to Hazrat Salman Farsi, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, a very great Sahabi, that one disbeliever approached Hazrat Salman radiallahu ta'ala anhu and said to him, your Prophet teaches you everything, even about going to the toilet. So Salman radiallahu ta'ala anhu, even though he knew that that person was mocking Islam, instead of giving a silly answer, he gave a response and said, yes, he has forbidden us to face the Qibla at the time of easing or urinating, and cleansing with your right hand, and cleansing with less than 3 stones, or cleansing with dung or bone. So, yeah, he made it very clear to that person that we have been taught how to go to the toilet, you know, what to use, etc. So he gave him the kind of detail showing that, yes, Islam is a very comprehensive religion. It covers every aspect of life. What is istinja? Istinja, according to the Sharia, istinja is cleaning the body parts from any impurities. It's not sufficient to go to the toilet, not wash yourself, and then perform wuzu. That is not sufficient, but a person has to clean themselves properly and make sure if any impurities are still on their private parts, they are cleaned thoroughly before they actually read the Quran Kareem or pray Salah. What materials can we use to perform istinja? And normally what we have in the toilet is probably water, and you may or may not have tissue paper. So number one, ideally, istinja is to be done with water. And I have explained before that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed the verse in the Quran Kareem where he praises a certain people. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فِيهِ رِجَالُ يُحِبُّونَ أَن يَتَطَهَّرُوا وَاللَّهُ يُحِبُّ الْمُطَّهِّرِينَ. That Allah ta'ala loves those who purify themselves very thoroughly. So the Prophet ﷺ, when he was in Quba in Medina, he asked the people at that time that how do you perform istinja? So the people then said that we use water and we also use pieces of earth. So the Prophet ﷺ said that this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has praised you, because you clean yourself very thoroughly. An alternative to that nowadays would be using water and tissue paper after you have been to the toilet. So number one, ideally istinja has to be done with water. The second is all those things which have the capability of cleaning, albeit with the condition that they are free from impurities. So for example, toilet paper. Toilet paper, I would say, is recommended. A person should clean themselves with toilet paper first of all, make sure all the drops of urine have been absorbed, and then they should wash themselves with water. So all those things which have the capability of removing impurity. A person should not use writing paper, because writing paper is something which we should respect. Writing paper has been made for the purpose of writing on it, not for cleaning oneself. So writing paper and blank paper should not be used for istinja. Toilet paper is allowed. I've just mentioned that because toilet paper is made for the reason to clean oneself when the person goes to the toilet. So it would be mustahab, it would be preferable to use toilet paper first of all, and then follow on with the water, which is a sunnah. So what's the ruling of istinja? Istinja is a religious obligation. In some cases, it's sunnah, and I've already explained before, it's a sunnah when the impurities do not reach more than, the impurities do not reach less, do not reach the amount of a 50p coin. If they do, or if they are excessive than a 50 pence coin, then istinja in them circumstances would become wajib and necessary. But if a person does go to the toilet and does not wash themselves or clean themselves without any valid reason, that would be deemed as makruh, provided that there's no urine drops on any of the private parts. If they are, then a person should wash them. And there's many reasons behind that. Negligence with regards to urine is a big problem, and failure of neglecting such an important act, meaning washing a person's private parts once they have been to the toilet, could cause a person's namaz to be void. So basically, if istinja is not done correctly, then the wuzu will not be done correctly. And if the wuzu is not performed correctly, then the salah will also not be accepted. The Prophet ﷺ has said regarding not taking care when urinating, most of the punishment in the grave is due to negligence in matters related to urine. And if a person does not take care when going to the toilet, then that can be a massive issue, especially those children who go to school. Now, most of the time in schools, they have I don't know what you call them. They have the toilet, and then they'll have them urinating kind of bowls. Okay. So if a child does use that, first of all, it's makruh to stand up and urinate. But if your child does use that, there's a massive possibility that urine will touch their clothing or splash onto their clothing. So it would be recommended that you don't use that. It's best to use the toilet. And if you think the toilet seat is not pure, then you can use a tissue paper and clean the toilet seat before you sit down. But what you can then do is, once you come home, you make sure you give yourself a good wash so that you are clean and pure before you go to the madrasa or before you go for salah. So the first part after washing oneself, which is known as istinja, there's something else called istibra. Now, what does istibra mean? Istibra means to clear droplets from the urinal passage. Now, there's a difference here. I mean, when women go to the toilet, it's not much of an issue, but when men go to the toilet, because our private parts and organs are different. So sometimes after urinating, what can happen is droplets of urine can stay inside the urinal passage. And once a person has been to the toilet, when they stand up, urine drops can come out into the underpants. And what then can happen is, because you haven't washed yourself properly, the wuzu will not count, and the salah will also not count. So getting rid of the droplets after urinating is known as istibra. Now there's several ways of doing istibra. How do we get rid of those excessive droplets after we go to the toilet? So in reality, it depends on a person's habit. So for some people, when they go to the toilet by coughing a few times, the excessive droplets of urine will come out, and a person can then wash themselves properly. Sometimes, for some people, after urinating, by walking a few steps, those excessive droplets of urine would come out. And everybody has their own kind of way of getting rid of those droplets. And if a person is not very sure that whether droplets would come out later on or not, then another method is you could put some tissue paper in the underpants, so that if any urine drops were to come out, then they will be absorbed in the tissue. And when a person has the opportunity to make wuzu, then they can take the tissue paper out and then perform wuzu. Maybe wash themselves beforehand as well. So istibra is wajib, istinja is sunnah. A person has to make sure that the droplets of urine have come out before they actually perform wuzu and salah. Now let's go through some etiquettes of going to the bathroom. So the bathroom should be entered with the left foot and exited with the right. The hadith mentions to the nearest, meaning that all those things which have some goodness should be done with the right, and all those things which are not seen as being very good should be done with the left. Hence, we eat with the right hand. When a person wears their clothing, start from the right if possible, etc. It is also recommended that one utters the sunnah du'as. So reading Bismillahi Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-khubuthi wal khaba'ith. And if you don't know that dua, then as a minimum read Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim before one enters the toilet, because the toilet is a place where jinns like to stay. Jinns, they love dirty places. If a person does not read Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim before going to the toilet, then there's a possibility of being affected by a jinn. So it's very important that a person reads the toilet dua before they actually enter the toilet. Is makruh tahrimi, strongly disliked and also sinful, to face or show the back towards the qibla when passing urine or stool. And if a person's toilet is facing the qibla, then they should turn slightly so that their back or front is not facing the qibla. Now, whether this is indoors or outdoors, both circumstances are the same. When a person enters the toilet, and in my opinion, it doesn't matter how clean you think the toilet floor is, you should not enter the toilet without slippers, because you do not know what type of impurities can be on the floor. So a person should definitely enter the toilet with slippers. It is sunnah to cover the head when going to the toilet, a practice of the Prophet ﷺ. Speaking, eating, using a phone should be avoided in the toilet. Doing so is contrary to the sunnah and makruh tanzihi. It's makruh to wash the private parts with the right hand without a valid reason. One should ensure that the private parts are not seen by anyone else. And a person's clothing should be removed once they are near to sitting onto the toilet. A person should try their best to avoid eye contact and looking at the impurities when going to the toilet. One should sit down and urinate. Standing and urinate is not advisable. It's contrary to the sunnah. If a person is in such circumstances that he knows that if I sit down and the floor is very, very impure, or the toilet is very, very impure, then in them circumstances a person can stand up. But it's something that a person should judge themselves. Any item which has the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam or any Quran verse should not be taken in the toilet, or as a minimum taken off and then put in the pocket. Inside the toilet, a person should not read any form of zikr and not take Allah Ta'ala's name, and should not also should not reply to salam if somebody says salam outside the toilet. And it's very, very inappropriate to urinate inside the bathtub or shower, because that can cause a person to become very, very doubtful. Right, okay. I've got some questions for you guys. So what I'll do is I will post these questions onto the group, and then for homework, you guys can send me your answers. So I'll just go through them first of all. So the questions are: name the two types of impurities. What is najasat hukmi? How should one clean najasat ghaliza that is on the body or clothes? What is najasat hakiki? Give some examples of najasat khafifa. Give some examples of najasat ghaliza. Explain makruh. Explain makruh tahrimi. What is haram? How is it to face the Kaaba when making istinja? Which foot should one enter? With which foot should one enter the toilet? What is the meaning of istinja? Can we use printed paper for istinja? And what is the meaning of the dua before we enter the toilet? And which direction should one not face when urinating? So all these answers are in Talim al-Haq, and I did mention that we're using Talim al-Haq as the main source for these lessons. Okay, moving on. So we've spoken about istinja. So before a person actually performs wuzu, make correct istinja, we have learnt about what kind of impurities we should avoid or we should remove before performing istinja, and also before performing wuzu. Now, you may also think that we already know how to do wuzu, but there are certain things that need to be clarified when a person does perform wuzu. Some people perform wuzu very, very slowly, where they're wasting water. Some people perform wuzu very hastily in such a manner where all the limbs are not covered properly. There's a hadith that mentions, I think the Prophet ﷺ, to the nearest meaning, he saw a Sahabi where his I can't remember what's that called actually. Yeah, so a part of his foot, heels, yeah, his heels were dry. His heels were dry. So the Prophet ﷺ said, "Wailul lil aqabi finnar." Wailul lil aqabi finnar. The heels were dry. So what that basically shows is sometimes when a person is not doing wuzu properly, what can happen is a part of the body can stay dry, and because of that, it would be a source of punishment on the day of judgment. I have a question here. Can you take a shower and do wuzu at the same time? Yes, you can. When a person has a bath, according to Islam, the Sharia bath, a person has an Islamic bath, then while you're taking a shower, it would be a sunnah to do wuzu at the beginning. Okay, also carrying on, it's narrated in the hadith that on the day of resurrection, this ummah will be summoned al-ghurr al-muhajjalun. What that basically means that the parts where we performed wuzu, the parts of the body where we performed wuzu would shine on the Day of Judgment. Hence, we would be recognized as the ummah of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Hazrat Abu Hurairah, I think it was Hazrat Abu Hurairah or either Hazrat Abu Zar Ghifari radiallahu ta'ala anhu, one of those Sahaba, I think it was Hazrat Abu Hurairah actually. He would wash his arms up to his, he would wash his whole arm, so also above the elbow. And when somebody asked him, why do you do that, even though it's only farz, only obligatory to wash your arms up to the elbow, he said, because I want my arms fully to shine on the Day of Judgment. And it also comes in a narration, that person who performs wuzu properly according to the sunnah, then his sins will depart from his body, even from under his nails. So it's basically, before performing salah, you have many opportunities to rid yourself of the sins that a person has committed. And if there's any sins remaining, they will be removed by performing the salah. There's also a hadith which mentions the nearest meaning that if a person were to have a bath, 5 times a day, if a person were to have a bath 5 times a day, if there was a stream in which a person would clean himself 5 times a day, would he not become clean? And the answer is obviously he would become clean in the same manner. Performing wuzu as a minimum of 5 times a day and also performing salah would rid a person of the impurities, the worldly impurities, and also the impurities which are connected to sin. So what is the ruling of wuzu? To perform certain acts of worship which otherwise cannot be performed, for example, salah, touching the Quran Kareem, tawaf of the Kaaba, wuzu is an obligation. So without performing wuzu, a person is not allowed to do any of these acts. And what we've got to remember is touching the Quran is not allowed, but reading the Quran Kareem without wuzu is permitted, even though it's better to perform wuzu before reading the Quran Kareem also. Wuzu can be performed with clean and pure water, which has not changed taste, color, smell, or density. If the water is overwhelmed and loses its thin and vicious nature, it will not be fit for wuzu. So that's the kind of principle here we need to understand. Water has to be water. If water loses its attribute of being water, then it is no longer fit for wuzu. I'll give you an example. So my question, okay, let's see who can answer this question. Would we be allowed to do wuzu with milk, and why? Why or why not? You can answer in the chat. Yes? Right, okay. So we have one answer. Yeah, so basically milk is not water. The taste of milk has changed. The smell has changed. And what milk is slightly more thicker than water. Are we allowed to do wuzu with Pepsi? No, we're not, because Pepsi, the taste has changed, the color has changed. Are we allowed to do wuzu with tea? No, we're not, because once you put a tea bag into water, it changes color, and also the name changes as well. So if the taste, color, smell, density, and name changes, then a person is no longer allowed to do wuzu with that water. We'll stop the session here today. And next week we shall continue. Does anybody have any questions?